universal.
It's counting in Polish. Dobry wieczór. Aku Bajki, Juliusz Sury.
Hubert Kubica.
Jonathan Shubs.
Kolejny z odcinków z Jonathanem. Chłopaki jeszcze nie wiedzą, jaki będzie temat. Ja go sobie wymyśliłem przed chwilą. Zobaczymy, co z tego będzie, jak zwykle. So, the next topic.
Yes.
You may be surprised, but we are in Europe. So, what we can do with myths, with hero's journey, heroine journey, and things like that.
Okay.
Because we are in the culture of hero's journey. Yeah.
Yes. So I'm not so sure that's only European, right? Because that's something that we also find hero myths in the Vedas. And what I would maybe postulate is that we have become single-minded in our understanding of myth, that it is only hero-based. And we start to interpret all of our myths from the point of the hero. This is probably most evident as if we were to look at the mythology that's being created now, because mythology is always a response to the cosmology and the ecology of the moment in which we're living. So what is the mythology that is most prevalent in our cinema, in our way of talking? If you think about the majority of movies, the majority of books that are coming out now, what is the common thread? Right? If you go to the cinema right now, there's probably at least one superhero movie.
There will be, yes.
So I would say is that we not only are in the period of the hero myth, we're in the period of the superhero myth.
Yes,
Not-
superhero, yes, not the hero. Yeah.
And that is where our focus is. That's how we perceive everything, because we all want to be the superhero of our own story. We have become this individualistic person who wants to, everything is about me.
Superhuman.
Yeah. And there are some things that's a myth, but I think it has become the myth. Right? I know Joseph Campbell wrote his book, the hero or the myth of a thousand faces, or the hero of a thousand faces. Yeah, the hero's journey. And he interpreted that all myth is about the hero. And I would say that that's probably missing a huge amount of myth and story. But maybe before we get to that is, what is the importance of myth? Why do we need myth? We live in a scientific time when we want to understand things from a scientific point of view.
Yeah.
So I'm asking you, what is your relationship to myth before I answer? What does myth mean to you?
I always find any information and instruction in each myth
Okay.
that can help me navigate through the life, through emotions, through myself.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes they're really like, how can I connect, myth with my situation of my life? Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So yeah.
For me, is it was always that I can be something more.
Okay.
I'm not limited to this plane.
Right. Okay. So first of all, there's no right or wrong answer. Everything
Yeah.
that we say is correct. There are some people who I was listening recently to Sophie Strand. I wouldn't even begin to explain the position or the title she holds in her world, but she's a biologist, a botanist, an evolutionarist. And from her point of view is that myth has been in the past a way in which to relate to the land. The myth was a way of passing down how to relate to the environment around us. For example, when to do the harvest, when to plant, what do the different seasons mean? And so that could be one way, and a very valid way of looking at the birth of myth.
Okay.
We can look at more of like the Jungian way or the Freudian way. The depth psychology is that myth is a description of the cosmology and psyche. And then we can use it to examine our psyche. And we can also look at myth as both of you had suggested. And maybe there are other ways also.
1,000 other ways.
Yes. So when we talk about the hero of 1,000 faces, maybe it's the myth of 1,000 faces would be a better title. And hero is one of those faces. And what are the roles of the hero and what happens to the hero? What's interesting is in most hero myths, the hero dies at the end. Right? So the hero does an adventure and then leaves.
For me, it's a grounding.
What happens when the hero leaves? That's the question.
Yeah.
Right? What's the outcome of the hero leaving? What happens? So what happens to us when our hero myth comes to its end, but we're still here?
Yeah. Is it really ending, right? Is it really ending?
Well, it's the thing is maybe that hero journey ends, but doesn't necessarily mean another hero journey will begin. Maybe it's a different story. And I think one of the reasons why there's the prevalence of so many hero stories is because that's an immature, when I say immature, it might be the right term, but it's almost like it's an immature psychology. It is the first part of our life when we're in our 20s or 30s young. That's when we are heroic.
Yeah, like action, yes.
Action. And then what happens after the hero finishes their journey? The myth sort of veers out into 1,000 different possibilities.
The unknown.
To the unknown. And so to come back to your question is yes, we are very much in a heroic myth now. That is our perception of everything is about the hero, the individual.
Superhero.
The superhero, right? It's not even how many children, and it's wonderful. I love the Harry Potter stories, but how many children want to be Harry Potter, that they're in the wrong place and there's this other world and there they can go and they can save this other world, right? But then what happens after? And so I think coming back to what I was trying to say is that one of the reasons that we focus on the hero myth is because we're all stuck in our idea of being before 30. Like, this idea is like, once we get past 30 or 40, our life is over. Because I think that's when we start a transition to another period. And we are moving from being the hero of the story to being the elder. And maybe we need to cultivate a myth, a mythology. And it's always been there in the ancient mythologies.
Yes. The elder.
The elder.
The wise one.
But to cultivate the path to eldership. There's a wonderful speaker named Stephen Jenkins who delves into this better than anybody I could imagine. Or another poet named David White who also talks about this very eloquently, and I'm not even going to pretend to do it as well. But our invitation, I think, is to because the hero journey and the hero myth was in relation to the elder. And if we look at the hero myths, probably the ones that we're most famous with are the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Okay? There was the Elder Council. There was Elrond. There was Gandalf.
Yep.
They weren't the heroes of the story.
Mm-hmm.
But we've lost our relationship to the wizard, to the king, to the elder. The advisor too, not the person doing.
True.
And it's not saying that we can easily become that. There's a whole process because we've become a de-elderized society. But in traditional societies, we still find that.
Yeah.
And so with your question, which was, what should we do about the hero story? We should honor it and also understand it's not the only one. And start cultivating other mythologies of our time and our place and our cosmos that are not only action-based, that I have to do something. And to explore that. I don't know what it will be like, because that's not the reality in which we live.
Okay.
But it's an invitation to maybe cultivate that.
Okay. But you asked, we discussed it, but why do you think that right now we have so many superheroes? Movies, shows, everything. Superhero, not just hero.
Well, we call them superheroes now.
Yeah.
And then when we look at the Greek myths of Hercules,
Yeah.
we call them heroes. But in their day,
gods, yeah.
in their day, they were superheroes.
True. Okay.
Well, the one thing I would say is that the majority of superheroes are one-dimensional, and that's what makes them super. So, for example, when we have the story of Hercules or the story of Jason and the Argonauts or any of these Greek mythology heroes, or in the Vedas, we have the hero stories, they were confronted with internal conflict. Our superhero is never confronted with their internal conflict. It's always the external conflict. So that's why I think we have created this. The only one superhero that I would say is not a superhero is Batman. Because he's confronting his own darkness.
His own, yes.
And he's also the only one who doesn't have superpowers.
True.
His superpower is to confront his fears.
Perhaps, but I'm saying is it's not from an extraordinary event that it happened.
Just a regular, normal guy.
Exactly. So I think Batman might
with
be...
a lot of money.
With a lot of money. But yeah, so the term superhero was created from the comic books in the coming out of the Great Depression. And that's what, Superman, I think, was the first superhero. And so it's a modern day concept that we use, the superhero. But it's hero.
Yeah. They've been gods, half gods, and so on.
Exactly.
Prometheus.
Well, he was a titan. And
yeah.
Right. And we can see it in our society, looking at politics. The politicians are trying to fulfill those roles that we want a hero to come and save us. And we either look at it from 2 points. Is either somebody's going to come and save us, or we have to save everybody else. Right? Those are like the two ways in which we relate to the world. And that's the heroic version.
Mm-hmm.
The invitation is, what if there's nothing to be saved? Not that there's no problems, but saving isn't the way forward.
Okay.
That would be an invitation just to explore.
And what about idea Joseph Campbell sticks really to the male's hero's journey?
Well, I think we have to remember that somebody like Joseph Campbell was a product of his time and place.
Yeah.
So being educated in the 1950s and being his main focus of research was the search for the Holy Grail, which is a male-dominated story. He chose the myths that reinforced already his perception of the world. And so then when you've chosen those myths that reinforce your perception of the world and then you try to interpret them, they're going to be interpreted by your perception. So his perception of the hero being a masculine aspect. So there's some truth in the archetypal vision that most heroes are masculine. But then when you say that it's the only myth, what you're doing is you're closing it off and you're reinforcing the masculine hero. So I think he missed the mark. Because he will say, I forget where in which one of his books he talks about is that the woman doesn't need to be the hero. She just needs to be. Thousand faces. So that's just a complete way of saying, let's not talk about women.
Yeah.
Right? It's very similar to the Catholic Church's version of sanctifying the Mother Mary. So she's a woman that we don't need to talk about her. She is.
That's it.
Right? So let's mistreat all the other women because they're already there. And this is all a story about man becoming better, etc. But he was also responding to his place and time in his world. And yeah, so I disagree with that statement. I don't think that's true. I think women can be heroes and men don't have to be heroes. And there's other myths to be explored beyond gender.
We don't have to be heroes. We discuss it, right?
We don't have to be heroes.
Just be.
Yeah. How interesting would it be if the motto was we don't all have to be heroes? How would our society change? And okay, so this is a podcast about acupuncturists. What if the acupuncturist didn't have to be the hero?
It's not about the money, right?
But what if the way that they interacted with the client is I'm not the hero.
I won't save you.
I won't save you. And maybe you don't need to be saved.
Okay, this is more deeper than I thought. Okay, because yes, we are not the heroes of the story in the acupuncture, right? We're just the tool, I would say.
Yeah. And what if the patient isn't the hero either?
This is deeper. This is deeper, right?
What if we step out of the paradigm of heroism?
Then we don't have to save anyone, right?
We don't have to say, it's not saying that the healer, the shaman, the acupuncturist doesn't still exist. But what if they're not there to save and the person going there is not there to be saved? What arises?
So what is the purpose to meet those people? Like, meeting of acupuncturist and client. They both don't need to be, or I don't know how to say that, but they are not heroes.
Mm-hmm. So maybe we should be a little bit more precise. It's not that we're banishing the thought of heroism. What we're saying is that that's not the basis of the relationship. There might be heroic moments within it, that they might be asked to take on the role of the hero for one moment. But the relationship is not based on hero to hero, or one hero saving the victim, or one person. But they're two humans that are meeting, whereas the acupuncturist has a toolkit to respond to the moment in which the person is there, and the person is there to bring a moment to be responded to. And it's a meeting.
It's not heroism. It's just me.
It's just a meeting. And exploring what happened.
That's good. Not good.
But it's very complicated from a therapist's point of view doing that.
Yes, you need to hide your ego.
Well,
there are three of us here, right? And our egos, right?
Yeah. What about it's not hiding our ego, but, and here I'll use a Jungian term, is putting your ego in service of the soul.
Okay.
Which means our ego is not about controlling the situation. Our ego is about allowing us, creating the pathway in which we can be in the situation. So it's not about hiding the ego. Maybe it's about questioning and working with the ego. And as a therapist, that is one of our most important things that we need to do.
Working together.
Working together, working with the patient, and working with ourselves. Right, so there is this Jungian concept is that the proper place of the ego is the janitor of the soul. I have decided to change it slightly, and I say is the proper place of the ego is the butler of the soul.
Okay.
Okay. Because the butler is still slightly more noble,
Yeah, it is. Yes, you're right. It's
dressed well, presents well, navigates the world with ease, but yet is in service to something greater than itself. It's not taking itself for being the master of the house.
yeah.
And the butler at the same time will be the janitor. It will clean the floor when the floor needs to be cleaned.
Yeah.
And when it needs to be presented outside, it's dressed well, speaks well. So I prefer that as opposed to the janitor, because you have this idea
Yeah.
where the
Yeah.
butler can be the janitor, but can also be this noble presentation.
It's much better.
How you confront that idea, I like it, with modern idea of killing ego to develop yourself?
Yeah, well, it's not only modern. We read about it in Buddhism, we read about it in Hinduism, the idea of letting go. And I would say is that we're misinterpreting, we're missing the mark when we say that. Is what we're saying is it's letting go of the ego's belief that the ego is the most important. And that in some ways feels like the ego dies, but it gets resurrected. It comes back. It doesn't leave completely. And when it comes back from that death, of it being confronted with, I'm not the master, it dies, it comes back, and there it can take its proper place in the house of soul as its butler. So the idea of killing the ego, it's an invitation to, but the ego is like the phoenix. It's always going to come back.
Reincarnate.
Right? So the question is how does it come back? How does it reincarnate? And we might need to kill our ego 1,000 times before it's completely there. Right? This is not like I highly question anybody who says, I had one experience and now I'm an enlightened individual. I'm not saying it's not true, but I would say the majority of people who say that type of statement, that's the ego talking again.
Yeah. They need to kill it again.
Right? You know, there used to be this, there was this joke, they had a meeting of enlightened people, right? They called them all together, and anybody who showed up wasn't allowed in.
And that's true. Yeah.
About enlightened, I really like the sentence of saying of Sadhguru, I think.
Mm-hmm.
If you think you are enlightened, spend 1 week with your family.
That's Ram Dass.
Ramdas.
That's a Ram Dass statement. Yes, exactly. You think you're enlightened, spend a week with your family, and then we'll speak. Yeah. But yeah, that's the question of ego. And as a therapist is how do we constantly work with that? And it's an ongoing thing. It's not something that we accomplish. That's our journey.
And we are back at the same point we started with the emotions. It's always with us.
Yes. And if you were to take the idea of emotion, what is an emotion in Chinese medicine?
I cannot answer that because you said it to me some time ago. You say it very well.
Okay.
Motion.
So it's energy and motion. So what is energy in Chinese medicine? Qi.
Qi.
So an emotion is a type of qi, like a function, right? So all energy needs to be moving, right? So our problem with our emotions, our energy emotion, is when we don't allow them to move. And what's the part of us that's not allowing them to move? It's our ego that is holding them back to try to protect us from different parts of ourselves, etc.
So we as acupuncturists got good fit to train our ego, because every treatment, every patient that we help with our acupuncture, our needles, make our ego stronger, that we are really good healers.
Yes.
But but it's not we are the good healers, right? But the patient is. But even not that, right? Like Jonathan said.
Yeah. What happens if it's actually the needle that's the hero?
Yeah. And it's
For example,
it's using me as a tool. Just take me there, right?
Exactly. I'm a vassal of the universe.
I will solve it.
Yeah. Exactly. Who knows?
With this sentence, we can go sleep. Dobranoc.
Thank you.
Right.
Mhm.